Good morning, guys. I'll get to the point right away. I'm retiring for good. I know the process was a pretty big deal last time, so when I woke up this morning, I figured I'd just press record and let you guys know first. So it won't be long-winded. I think you only get one super emotional retirement essay, and I used mine up last year. So really thank you guys so much, to every single one of you, for supporting me, my family, my friends, my teammates, my competitors. I could go on forever. There's too many. Thank you guys for allowing me to live my absolute dream. I wouldn't change a thing. Love you all.
It's time for the JMRA Football Podcast, a podcast for the fans, by a fan. Here's your host, Derek Jones.
It's the JMRA Football Podcast. I am your host, Derek Jones, and we are here today to talk about the National Football League. We've got some fun stuff headed your way over the next handful of minutes because we are talking about the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL heading into this season. But before we get there first, let's give you the social media rundown. You can check us out on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and even TikTok by searching Joe Montana's Right Arm. We've got some fun stuff headed your way this season, and it should be a good time as the NFL season just right around the corner. Kickoff between the Chiefs and the Lions, a shocking selection to some, including me, for the opening night game on September 7th. That should be a very intriguing battle. I would expect an easy win for the Chiefs, but we'll talk about that as we get a little closer. But the reason we're here today is to go over the top 10 quarterbacks as I see it. Now, if you caught wind of what we played in the beginning of the show, yes, your hero and mine, Thomas Edward Patrick Brady, has retired. He's not coming back. I think. I'm pretty sure he's not coming back. Anyhow, highly unlikely that he ever takes a snap in the NFL again. I'm sure he will get a phone call at some point because here's what happens. Somebody's going to get hurt this season, and it's likely going to happen to a team that's contending, and they're going to pick up the phone and call him. This is a time-honored tradition. Back in 2002, Donovan McNabb was leading the Philadelphia Eagles to the playoffs. But before he got to the playoffs, McNabb suffered a broken leg. So the Eagles at the time thought, okay, what do we do? And Andy Reid picked up the phone and called Troy Aikman to possibly replace Donovan McNabb. Remember, at this point, Troy Aikman had been retired for 2 seasons. He's already in the booth calling games for Fox with, at the time, it was Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, and Chris Collinsworth. So they called Troy Aikman because they did not want the season to go by the boards. Of course, we know what happened. McNabb came back. Did he come back too soon? Who knows? But we do know the Eagles did not win the Super Bowl that season. Instead, it was Tampa Bay who went into Philadelphia and handled the Eagles by the tune of 27-10 to win the NFC Championship game, and then, of course, win Super Bowl 37. So there is some precedence for a guy getting called who's in retirement. You know, the word last year was that had the 49ers gotten to the Super Bowl somehow through that menagerie of injuries they suffered against the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, they were going to dial up Phil Rivers to play in the Super Bowl. That would have been very interesting. But this is what happens to contenders. They get desperate. They need to figure out a way to try to save the season. So I would not be surprised if somebody calls Tom Brady. But his departure opens up some discussion for the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. So without further ado, let's get to it and start with number 10. We'll start you in Dallas. Dak Prescott. Now, Dak Prescott's a very polarizing figure, especially where I am in the Philadelphia area. Prescott has been very up and down. He's been very rocky in terms of the number of times he's turned over the ball. And this is a quarterback who, 2016, comes in, leads the Cowboys to the playoffs, leads the Cowboys really to the best record in the NFC until they get knocked out by the Green Bay Packers in the divisional round. And really, that's as close as Dallas has really gotten to reaching the NFC Championship game. If you look at Prescott's numbers from last year, 23 touchdown passes, 15 interceptions in 12 games, which in this era ain't great. A quarterback rating of 91.1, a QBR of 57.9. Yuck. When the lights were brightest, good old Dak was not at his best. So I have him at number 10. Look, if the Cowboys want to reach the Super Bowl, he's got to play better. You look at his last handful of games, just wasn't that impressive. Against the 49ers, 23 of 37, 206 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions in a game that was decided by 7 points. You know, he has those games, and then, the week before against Tampa, 305, 4 touchdown passes, passer rating 143.3. Lights out against Tampa. The final game of Tom Brady's career, we think. But that's just been the uneven nature of Prescott's career. He's got to figure it out if Dallas wants to go to a Super Bowl. Number 9, Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence and the Jaguars overcome that 27-0 deficit at the hands of the Chargers, and the Chargers with one of the great meltdowns in postseason history, leading 27-0 in the first half. They lose the game 31-30 at the gun. And, look, Trevor Lawrence didn't play his best at times in that game. He ended up, listen to this stat line from that game, 28 of 47, 288 yards, 4 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions. We talked about uneven performances from Dak Prescott. Trevor Lawrence, kind of another one who, it's his 3rd year coming up, and I think we're still waiting for that explosion from him. We'll see if we get it, but last season, a good year for him, no doubt, getting the opportunity to be with Doug Peterson as his head coach. And, Doug Peterson, very solid coach, Super Bowl winning head coach. And this was a great opportunity for Trevor Lawrence to learn from him and get a chance to really develop his game. And to his credit, that's what he was able to do. Now, when you take a look at the totality of Trevor Lawrence's season, 25 touchdown passes, 8 interceptions, threw for a little over 4,000 yards. It was okay. Again, not elite, but he's on the rise. And you look at his game heading into the season, Calvin Ridley's there. Another year of Christian Kirk. We'll see if Kirk can kind of duplicate his success from a season ago. So it should be a fun season for the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. So I have him at number 9. Number 8, Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. I know this one's polarizing. Here's a funny thing about Kirk Cousins. On the TikTok page for Joe Montana's right arm, one of the videos I posted a few weeks ago was a post about the top 10 rated quarterbacks in NFL history. Kirk Cousins is on that list. Kirk Cousins is tied for the 8th highest passer rating in NFL history. Now, does that say something about passer rating? Maybe. But 97.8 is good. It's good, and it's good enough to be tied for 8th all time. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, Cousins is not a winner. He doesn't lead his team to, championship games. He doesn't lead his team to multiple playoff wins. If you look at Cousins' numbers last season, 29 touchdown passes, 14 interceptions, over 4,500 yards passing. Really the second highest total of his career in terms of passing yardage. 2016 with Washington, he threw for almost 5,000 yards. Look, people don't like this guy because of the contract, because of how he presents himself sometimes. He's made 2 straight Pro Bowls, and I know the Pro Bowl means a different thing now than it used to. I get that. The guy had 8 fourth quarter comebacks last season. He had 8 game-winning drives last season. Both of those numbers led the NFL. I don't care what you say. I'm going with Kirk Cousins at number 8. Number 7, I'm going to ruffle some feathers here. Number 7 on my list is a man who played in the Super Bowl last year, Jalen Hurts. And I know before people, well, I don't understand how you can do that. How can you do that? Why? Why are you doing that? Well, it's pretty simple. I did these rankings based off the fact that this is not just looking at last year, but we're looking at the body of work and what they could do heading into this season. In my opinion, Hurts still has something to prove as a starter. If you look at his numbers last year, they were exceptional. 3,700 yards passing, 22 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions. But in terms of rushing the football, the guy was just a beast. 760 yards rushing, 13 rushing touchdowns. If you include the playoffs, he had 18 rushing touchdowns. That's crazy. Why is he here? He finished second in the MVP race last year, All-Pro second team. Why is he at number 7? It's pretty simple. The guy's done this for 1 year. That's why. You look at the year before and see stuff gets clouded because people, I think, don't want to acknowledge the first season for whatever reason. His first season as a starter, the Eagles were 8-7. Hurts threw for just over 3,000 yards, 16 touchdown passes, and 9 interceptions. And he got blown out in the playoff game against Tampa. Tampa was up 31-0, won 31-15. What did you see in 2021 that said to you that Jalen Hurts was a top 10 quarterback? Well, apparently the Eagles didn't think that he was going to be a top 10 quarterback because reportedly there were trade rumors that the Eagles are trying to get Russell Wilson. They were kicking the tires on this guy, kicking the tires on that guy. They were trying to see what their options were out there at quarterback because they felt like they had a roster that was capable of winning the Super Bowl or at least getting to a Super Bowl. And as we found out last season, they're right. They were able to put together a roster that was the second best team in the NFL. People are starting to kind of brush aside that 21 season like, oh, that doesn't count. You're damn right it counts. So he's had one meh year and one excellent year. If he has another excellent year, he won't be number 7 on this list next season. He'll be much higher, but he's still got a ways to go. He was sensational in the Super Bowl. I will not doubt that at all. But to me, and I know people don't want to hear this, you know who the best player is on the Philadelphia Eagles? It's not actually a player. It's the offensive line. That offensive line makes everything work. Now, again, is that to discredit Jalen Hurts? No. But Hurts is pretty much allowed to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants, thanks to that excellent offensive line. So I've got Hurts at 7. Number 6, Lamar Jackson. I know Lamar Jackson has a lot to prove because Lamar Jackson won the MVP in 2019, and since that time, it has been spotty. 2020, 21, and 22 have been a mixed bag. Led his team to the playoffs in 20. In 21, he gets hurt 12 games in. In 22, he gets hurt 12 games in, and he misses the rest of the season, and he has to watch Tyler Huntley take on the Bengals in the playoffs. So he's battling some injury issues and some injury concerns here over the last couple of seasons because that's not good. And in fact, just this stat is what it is, but Lamar Jackson has never started all 16 games in an NFL season, or in this case, 17 games. So he's got to prove that. He's got to be able to make sure he's out there for his team because we already know he's an MVP caliber player, but he's got to be able to stay out there. It's a very interesting thing. They've poured more resources into the passing game in Baltimore, but I'm going to read Lamar's passing numbers here over the last few years. So you go through 2019, throws for over 3,000 yards, has the 36 touchdown passes, led the NFL in QBR, 113 passer rating. In 20, 21, and 22, he had 26, 16, and 17 touchdown passes. Now, again, as a part of that, the Ravens made the playoffs 2 out of 3 years. They lose in the divisional round in 20 to the Bills. In 21, they don't make the playoffs, in part because of his injury. Last year, they got to the playoffs, despite really not having a team that towards the end of the year was really building any kind of momentum. The Ravens lost 3 of their last 4 games heading into that playoff loss against Cincinnati that they lost by 7 points. So I'm not feeling super great about Lamar because of the injury history. But again, he's shown you that he can do it when he's on the field. When he's on the field, there aren't many guys that can touch him. But for right now, I've got him at number 6. Number 5. This one I struggled with. I didn't know whether to put this guy out of the top 10, put him at 10, put him at 9, put him at 8. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to put him at 5. I say that somewhat in jest. It's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is the new quarterback of the New York Jets. Look, I have Rodgers here for a couple reasons. 1, I think he can still throw the football effectively. 2, I think he was really hamstrung by how Green Bay constructed that team last season with a bunch of young receivers. They did not replace Devontae Adams at all. And when you do that kind of thing, that puts so much stress and pressure on the quarterback when you have a bunch of new, young wide receivers and you're trying to figure out a way that these guys can be useful enough to you for you to become a playoff team again or to even become a Super Bowl team. And neither happened for Green Bay last season. When you take a look at what Rodgers was able to do a year ago numbers-wise, I mean, again, this is a guy that is coming off of MVP year after MVP year after MVP year. He won the MVP in 20, he won the MVP in 21, and now with the Jets, he's got a new lease on life, and he's seen his touchdown pass total diminish over the last 2 seasons. He threw 48 and 20. He threw 37 and 21. He threw 26 last year. And that's the thing. Because of the move to the Jets, he has better weapons. Garrett Wilson at wide receiver really is his top wide receiver. That should be a major help to the offense. He's got a good running game there with Breece Hall and also Dalvin Cook. The big question for Aaron Rodgers to me, will that offensive line be okay? I don't know about that. That offensive line looks a little creaky in the preseason. We'll see if it's good enough to be able to give Rodgers sufficient time to throw the football effectively. I think he still has the tools physically. I don't know how much longer he can go at a high level, but I think when you start looking at the names and saying, hey, is he better than this guy? Yes. Is he better than that guy? Yes. I still think Rodgers has the tools, has the accuracy to be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, so I have him at number 5. Number 4, this might be a little polarizing because we just ripped his team a little while ago, Justin Herbert. Look, I don't care what you say, oh, he hasn't won a playoff game, blah, 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 blah. It's great. The arm talent, the skill is almost unmatched by anybody in the NFL. Herbert suffered a serious rib injury last year. Because of that, it compromised his game. There's no doubt about that. He had a lot of trouble throwing the ball downfield. He was throwing a ton of checkdowns last season. He was one of the most active quarterbacks in the league in terms of throwing the ball to running backs and throwing the ball, with a small depth of target. He was not doing a lot in terms of throwing the football deep, in part because his receivers from game to game, because they were hurt too, but also his rib injury, which, you have a rib injury, you can't open up and throw bombs like he had been over the previous years. So I think that really kind of hindered his game last season. Still, it was good enough to get the Chargers into the playoffs. And again, I think Herbert is a sensational talent. I think he's one of the most talented players in the NFL, period. I've got him here at number 4. It's just a situation where Herbert, he's got to figure out a way, I think, to elevate himself, to really get into, I think, that next tier that we're going to talk about. Because the next 3 guys we're going to talk about, I think there's a line of demarcation between Herbert and those 3 guys. And that's really one of the big steps he's going to have to take. Kellen Moore is his new offensive coordinator. We'll see if that's a big help to the Chargers offense. I think it can be. I think it likely will be. And if it is, we'll see Herbert back in the playoffs, and maybe this time with an opportunity to actually win a playoff game or two, or who knows, maybe even three. But nonetheless, big year for Herbert coming up. We shall see what he has in store for the rest of the NFL. Number 3, Josh Allen. Josh Allen has been amazing over the last couple of years, but when the time has come for Josh Allen to deliver, he has not been able to do it to a level that has put the Buffalo Bills into a Super Bowl. And let's be honest, you've probably figured out who the last 2 guys remaining on this list are, and they, at the very least, have played in Super Bowls. Josh Allen has not. Allen did not play well last year in the playoff loss against Cincinnati. 25 of 42, 264 yards and an interception, passer rating of 68. Remember, coming into the postseason, Allen was one of the highest-rated postseason passers of all time. Now, granted, it's not a large sample size. It's only a handful of years, but still, pretty good. I think that for Allen, the turning point that I look at was the Week 8 loss to the Jets. He suffers that elbow injury, and before that elbow injury, listen to this run Allen was on. Started the year against the Rams, 297 yards, 3 touchdown passes. Next week against Tennessee, in a win, 41-7, 317, 4 touchdown passes. Following week in a loss to Miami, 400 yards, 2 touchdown passes. So he had 2 400-yard games before the loss to the Jets. And he had 2 more 300-yard passing days. And then after the loss to the Jets, he really did not throw the ball effectively. He had 2 300-yard passing days, one against Minnesota in that crazy game where Minnesota really stole that contest from Buffalo. And that's another reason why I'm kind of down a little bit on Allen, because there were some games this year where he could have, or last year I should say, where he could have come through and he did not. The loss against Minnesota at home, bad loss. I know he got hurt late, but the loss to the Jets, where they only score 17 points, that's not good. Yes, the Bills won their final 7 games of the regular season, but Allen just wasn't Allen. And then he gets to the playoffs, and against Miami, look, good game, statistically 352 yards, 3 touchdown passes, but a couple of turnovers in the mix. It's one of these things where he just did not take care of the football effectively, in my opinion. You know, he throws 35 touchdown passes, great. 14 interceptions. For a guy who is trying to outduel really the top quarterbacks in the AFC, he's got to find a better way to take care of the football. And if he doesn't, it's going to be hard for the Bills to reach their ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl. It's going to be tough. So Allen's got to take better care of the football, but Josh Allen's talent is otherworldly. He can run the ball as good as any quarterback in the NFL, and his arm is damn near as good as anybody in the NFL. He is an elite level talent. Can he find that consistency that he has shown at times throughout the last couple of years that really made Buffalo a threat to win the Super Bowl? That's the big question I have going into the 23 season. Number 2, the currently injured quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the top 2 guys because I think their records and their resume kind of speak for themselves at this point. But Burrow has been so effective as quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals. I think the big thing you look at with Burrow, and I'm a sucker for teams that win playoff games on the road, because that, to me, that means something. That means you have some mettle, some moxie about you. as a team and as a leader and as a player. And Burrow, look, wonderful opportunity here for the Bengals to try to get back to the Super Bowl and possibly win one. And we know this, they're going to try to reach the AFC Championship game for the third year in a row coming up without having home field advantage in the first 2 years. Remember, they have won road playoff games at Buffalo, at Tennessee, at Kansas City. 3 of the hardest places to play in the NFL. They have road wins over those teams. Now, what has sunk Joe Burrow's hopes of winning a Super Bowl over the last 2 seasons has ultimately been the play of the offensive line in Cincinnati. They did not deliver late in the Super Bowl. They allowed Aaron Donald to get through and cause really a major disruption of the Bengals offense in their attempt to try to win Super Bowl 56. And then last season, late in the AFC Championship game, and I know a lot of people point to the personal foul call against Patrick Mahomes late in that contest, but if you remember, Cincinnati had opportunities to win that game and just could not do it. And Burrow in that contest, not his best stuff. 26 of 41, 270, 1 touchdown pass, 2 interceptions, passer rating of 70. Not what we're accustomed to seeing from Joe Burrow, but the alarming thing in that game was he was sacked 5 times. And that's where you look at Cincinnati and say to yourself, man, they've got to clean that up. 35 touchdown passes last season, 12 interceptions for an offense that had reworked the offensive line, but you need healthy bodies to block at the end of the year, and Cincinnati didn't have that, and that cost him dearly. But Burrow's game, I think, is so solid. He's steady. Now, you want to talk about, and I hate the comparisons of Joe Montana. I really do, because there's only one Joe Montana. But I really look at Joe Burrow, and I see his game, and that reminds me a lot of Joe Montana. The cool, the presence, the demeanor. The only thing the Bengals need to do now is make sure he stays healthy, because that's becoming a scary proposition. This guy can't have a regular, normal preseason. There's always something going on. He had the appendectomy last year. He's got the calf injury this year. And if you remember, in his rookie year, he suffered the ACL injury. So it's just been one thing after the other after the other. We'll see how things play out for him in 23. And that leaves our final gentleman, the number 1 quarterback in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes. And I got to say, if you've listened to this podcast before, I've been somewhat skeptical of the Chiefs because people talk about the Chiefs being a dynasty and all this stuff. And they still got a little ways to go, I think, to be a dynasty. But Mahomes just, you can't knock the credentials. You can't. 41 touchdown passes last season, led the NFL. Over 5,000 yards passing, a career high, 5,250, led the NFL. Yards per game, led the NFL last year. Wins the MVP. Wins Super Bowl MVP last year. No one had won the MVP and won the Super Bowl in the same season since Kurt Warner did it in 1999. Now Patrick Mahomes has done that. What can you say? I mean, the guy's the best quarterback in the NFL. I think the big challenge for Mahomes, with all the moving deck chairs they have, a.k.a. wide receivers, on that offense, can they find their groove? And I think that was the thing last year that really impressed me most. He did it with receivers that really weren't exceptional. You're looking at Valdez-Scantling, and even though he's gone now, McCole Hardman and Juju Smith-Schuster. They bring in Kadarius Toney. And it just, it's not a wildly successful group of receivers. And it's going to change again this year. They have different guys. Rashee Rice, they draft him. Sky Moore, who really didn't do much, only caught about 20 passes last year. They've got to find a way to get more out of that wide receiving group. But The fact that they were able to win the Super Bowl with a less than stellar wide receiving core just speaks to how great Mahomes is. And I don't like the comparisons to Brady and saying, oh, do you think Mahomes can catch Tom Brady to be the GOAT? No, he can't. People are going to say, well, all he has to do is win 4 Super Bowls and he's there. No. Being the GOAT is more than rings. It's the whole body of work. But so far, Patrick Mahomes has a pretty good body of work. He is numero uno in the NFL at quarterback. And with that, we've reached the conclusion of the JMRA Football Podcast this time out. We will join you again later on this week as we take a look at our first power rankings of the season and the teams that can win Super Bowl 58. Until next time, happy football, everybody. See ya.